On Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora inside of the Great Lakes Honda City Studios to speak on Diego Pavia's situation, the lawsuit, the future of NCAA eligibility concerning JUCO amidst so many things going on with the NCAA. They must have a lot of lawyers. We know they got a lot of money because they've been in court for a while. Mike, how we doing?
Doing pretty good. Hope you are. Staying warm?
Yeah, definitely staying warm, Mike. I could say something about the two of us. I'm happy that neither one of us is NCAA right now. is
Right.
within this world. I'm gonna give some background here, and Mike and I are gonna discuss this because, like I said, Mike Houston, a longtime collegiate head football coach, and so this decision for Diego Pavia could very much affect your future in how you coach and different things that you do, whatever may be coming down the pipeline for you. So, Diego Pavia, New Mexico Military Institute is where he was at junior college in the NJCAA, which I know very well. My hometown of Syracuse, New York, has OCC, which competes in the National Junior Collegiate Athletic Association, NJCAA. Now, that's what junior colleges are governed by. It's not by the NCAA, it's by the NJCAA, New Mexico Military Institution, institute part of the NJCAA for JUCO. Pavia spent 2 years there. Then he transferred to New Mexico State for 2 years. And then you tack on Vanderbilt, and here we are. He sued the NCAA back on November 8th of 2024, arguing that the 5-year eligibility clock and rules governing redshirts unfairly restrain the market for former JUCO players. I want to get your thoughts, Mike, on this. I'm going to stop here for a second. Suing the NCAA, and recently here, within a couple months' time, arguing that the 5-year eligibility clock, which for people that don't know that, you have 5 years to have 4 years of eligibility, which obviously includes the red shirt, and the rules governing red shirts. So that 5-year eligibility clock and the rule governing red shirts unfairly restrains the market for former JUCO players. I'd love to get your thoughts on the wording of that and your take on it.
Well, I think this is just another example of what we've seen in the last 5 years, where all these lawsuits that the NCAA is having to battle. That's what brought about the transfer restrictions being lifted. It's what brought about the NIL being allowed. And so now this is another case that they've got to battle. And I think there's so much to unpack with this. The thing that people didn't realize when they took away the transfer restrictions and created the transfer portal and the ability to move from school to school uh, multiple times, year to year,
Yeah.
semester to semester. Um, and also when they allowed the student athletes to benefit from their name and image likeness, the things that happened because of those two rulings were the unintended consequences. You knew what the basic, what was going to happen, but then all of a sudden you have all the other things that happen as a result, and now you have collectives and you have free agency semester to semester, and it's not good for the sport. And I think this is another thing. What's right. You got to figure out what that is, but
Yep.
also you got to figure out how you're going to, what other ramifications is this going to have. And I know everybody at Vanderbilt's excited. Diego, just watching him this past year, I mean, he's a dynamic player, and he immediately makes them better next year being there. And
Yeah.
so, and you don't fault him either. He just wants to play ball.
Yeah.
And so, there's lots of things on both sides, but I think that with this, you have to be careful, because if they approve this, and then all of a sudden you have 2 more years of eligibility for all these kids, what's going to be the unintended consequences for high school recruiting, junior college recruiting, the game in general, because it's going to have ripple effects down the line. So I would be very, very cautious, just barreling forward and just saying, well, yeah, they all get 2 more years of eligibility.
Yeah, and again, I mean this, and we'll get to more pieces of this and where it's at right now. But I do want to let people know kind of the gist of this, and so this is the verbiage of what I've taken here from the lawsuit. Despite what the NCAA may claim, the JUCO eligibility limitation bylaws restrain college athletes from improving their economic opportunity, personal growth, and well-being with NIL opportunities. I find it interesting here that we talk about opportunity and growth and well-being, but it's all roped into money. It's money, then it
Right.
restates money through a full 4-year college playing experience. A freedom afforded to all athletes who enroll at NCAA Division One members as freshmen, but not to junior college football player transfers. This restriction violates the Sherman Act because it has direct anti competitive effects that harm college football players and consumers of college football. In essence, the JUCO eligibility limitation bylaws amount to no more than an agreement to limit the amount of time athletes may play Division One football because they have chosen to attend a non-NCAA institution prior to transferring to a Division One NCAA college. These same restrictions are not placed on athletes who choose to delay entry to a Division One NCAA college to attend prep school, serve in the military, or even to compete professionally in another sport. So, really, when we stick with this, because let's be real, and I'll dig more deep into it in just a little bit here on some things that were claimed, but we're going after JUCO eligibility limitation bylaws in Diego Pavia's lawsuit against the NCAA, which, quote, states that he was restrained and college athletes are restrained from improving their economic opportunity, personal growth, and well being with NIL opportunities. This never states education. This never states what personal growth truly means. It says economic, then it says personal growth, then it goes back to economic in connection with well being. So the way that I read this, Mike, and this is no offense to Diego Pavia, but I'm hearing he wants to make money. They're supposed to make money. They can make money. Why can't he make money? Let him make more money. That's what I'm reading in this is money, 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 which the NCAA has long had those giant safes full of it. And it seems like with all of these lawsuits and different things going on, those safes are opening up. But uh, I'm just kind of at a loss here of this lawsuit essentially is granting more time, but I'm hearing give us more time because there's more money in that time.
Right. I mean, that's and if I'm sitting in his shoes, I'm trying to get the same thing. And it is what college athletics has turned into, and that's the reality, and that's why much like we've talked before, I think the quicker that you can get some parameters around more of a business model with college football, especially, the better. I think right now you have the NCAA, which is supposed to be the governing body for college athletics. And they're supposed to be the ones that give us the rules and the guidelines and enforce those rules and guidelines. Yet, they're being told what they can and can't do by the courts. And so I think you've got to get Congress involved, and you've got to get some parameters where there's rules and there's enforcement across the board. And that way, you don't have the NCAA saying, well, this is what you can do. And then, a court or a judge somewhere saying, well, no, you can't do that. They've got to be allowed to do this. And I think it's too much vague, just unsettling stuff across the board everywhere where you don't know what the rules are.
Yeah, and again, I mean, this was something, and you and I spoke about this, but this was something that you and I had talked about, I had stated 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago. My prediction on this show, on Wake Up Call, was if the NCAA doesn't change from the things that they're doing, the rules that they have and that they don't have, the way they treat some schools and don't treat others, this vagueness that they have, this favoritism that they have, if the NCAA continues to function the way that they were functioning, I said this almost 7 years ago, then I predicted at that time, 5 to 10 years from that moment, the NCAA would cease to exist at all. And if it did exist, it would look vastly different. That prediction has come true. Everything about that prediction has come true because the NCAA is on the precipice of non-existence and they don't look the same. NIL is here. The transfer portal is here. Realignment makes absolutely no geographical sense. So, as we stand here right now with everything being run by the money, I do want to let people know the NJCAA does allow for NIL. Now, getting more into the case, arguing that by allowing players 3 years remaining eligibility at best after 2 years at junior college, the NCAA is illegally restricting players' earning potential. That's what the lawsuit talks about. Once again, money. Athletes' eligibility clock starts when they enter a 2-year school, even if they don't play. The lawsuit by Diego Pavia allegedly specifically mentions Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel, who are not just on a team, but were starters for 5 years due to the COVID-19 extension. Pavia did not get the COVID-19 extension when he was at the New Mexico Military Institute. So that's something else to note here. Dylan Gabriel, because I knew Dylan Gabriel when he was at UCF, then he went on to Oklahoma, then Oregon. Pavia's lawsuit requests an injunction preventing the NCAA from enforcing the rules that the lawsuit claims violate antitrust laws and asks for Pavia to be granted 1 or 2 more years of eligibility at Vanderbilt. Now, he was at New Mexico Military Institute, Mike, for 2 years. Then he was at New Mexico State for 2 years. He was granted another year because, I guess, not having the redshirt year. So he's already had a 5th year of college at Vanderbilt, which he served this past year in 2024-25. He's asking for a 6th year, and this lawsuit even presents the request for a 7th year of eligibility. Pavia is 24 years old. So he could be entering the NFL draft at 26 or 27 years old. Bring me into your thoughts on this, because we have talked about the decaying of the availability for high school and prep school student athletes to get into college football. If this, and the injunction's already been requested and granted, but if Pavia wins this outright and the NCAA sees this precedence and is forced to change these rules, we have now given student athletes a route where I can be 17 years old as a senior in high school. I can go to prep school, be 18 years old. I could go to junior college, be 19, 20 years old. And at the time I'm supposed to graduate, I could enter the NCAA as a college football student athlete at 21 years old and play 4 years as if I never went to prep school and never went to junior college. Bring me into your thoughts on this. I guess it gives the fringe high school student athlete who's not good with their grades an opportunity to go to JUCO and not be punished. There are good that comes from this.
Right.
But where are we heading in this world where now, if I'm a student athlete, and I wish we had this back then when I was playing basketball, Mike, but if I'm a student athlete, I got high school, prep school, junior college. I could have gone to OCC for 2 years, played, honed my skills. I can shoot. I'm 5'8", so I could have pushed myself more, done more things there, and then reached out to the NCAA, maybe get a D2, maybe get a D3 offer, do something in that respect. I got NIL money now. I have a place to go, and now I'm not going out until the working force until I'm 26, 27 years old. Your thoughts on what this can do, as Pavia's lawsuit is saying, I've played 5 years of ball, but I want 2 more, and at least 1.
Well, I think it'll change recruiting. If let's say this passes and they can go to JUCO for 2 years and still have 5 years to play 4, which I think that's going to change also. I think you're going to see the redshirt stuff go away, which I think is good. I think just give everybody 5 years to play five, and that way you don't have some of these guys deciding they want a redshirt mid-season or whatever, and coaches don't have to worry about how many games a kid's played in and this, that, and the other, especially with the reduced roster size coming in July. Just allow them all to play 5 years to play five. But if you have this now where they get an additional 2 years that don't count against their clock, I could see you know schools going much more heavy recruiting junior college players ahead of high school student athletes. And I could also see a lot more high school student athletes you know, choosing to go the junior college route, whether they have the grades or not,
Yeah.
just because you can go and you can develop for 2 years.
Yeah.
I think it's going to have a lot of ramifications across the board just on how colleges recruit. I think you'll still see your very top high school kids. They'll still sign with a Power Four school. Um, but I think it's all the rest of the players, all the 3 stars and the 2 stars and the whatever. Those guys are going to have fewer scholarships now than they even have um, currently this year. And that's is that good? Is that bad? I just think it's going to create less and less opportunities for high school student athletes graduating.
Yeah. I mean, it almost promotes for you to go to junior college at this point, if it's granted. Now, the court filing also stated Pavia could earn over $1 million if allowed to play in 2025. So again, the money saying, hey, you don't let this guy play NCAA Division I football, you might cost him $1 million. Now, that's not stated if he's got that money yet. If he has somewhere where that NIL money is going to come from, but it states that he could be losing money if you don't allow him in. Now, the injunction was granted from Judge William L. Campbell Jr., which allows Pavia to start preparation for 2025. Now, in starting his preparation, it does not mean that he has won his case. The case is still pending. The injunction was granted because waiting for the case to be decided upon would harm him. Harm him is the word that was used. Harm him even if he won the case because of the amount of time that this may take. Now, here's the thing that's interesting, Mike, and this is the thing that really makes me uneasy about this case. The injunction allows Pavia to start preparation for 2025, which includes looking for NIL, name, image, and likeness money, and it also allows him to transfer in the portal. So think about if Vanderbilt went through all of this stuff and then Pavia gets offered $3 million from some other school somewhere else. Let's say the Gators go, hey, we like DJ Lagway, but we're not sure about DJ Lagway, and you're 24 years old, and you've been in this game for a while, and dude's been up and down, so why don't you come to the Gators, stay in the SEC, we'll give you 3 if they're going to give you 1 at Vandy. What if, and I'm just saying a what if Diego Pavia goes through all of this stuff with Vanderbilt, and then he leaves and goes somewhere else?
It would fit right in with what's happening, across the board in the game right now. You just see so many situations like that, and I hate that stuff. And again, one party sits here and says, "Well, do you blame him? If he can get 3
Yeah.
versus 1, do you blame the kid? You can't blame the kid." But it certainly is another piece that undermines the thing that we all believe in: the continuity, the team, loyalty, all those things. So I think with all this, I think we've gotta get control of college football, college athletics. We're talking college football here, from a standpoint of, it needs to become its own thing. It needs to become a structured deal where there's a salary cap, pay the players,
Yeah.
uh, have a collective bargaining agreement with the players and the NCAA or with college football. Um, have a commissioner, have a governing body that has power, and get it away from where everybody's running to sue somebody or bring up a lawsuit or whatever. I mean, you don't see this happening in the NFL. I mean, an NFL player can't go to a judge and say, well, this or whatever. No, it's a job. It's an industry. It's there's rules, and there's structure, and there's accountability. And so I think we've got to get that piece back into college athletics, or get it in college athletics, to quiet down some of this stuff, to where, if I'm Vanderbilt, I'm uneasy all over the place.
Yeah.
You don't know if you have Diego. You don't know if you don't have Diego. How are you preparing right now? Well, they've got to prepare. If you're them, you have to prepare to not have him next year, no matter what. But it just leaves so much up in the air, because that's a scholarship that you have to save for him in case you can have him. Well, that's a scholarship somebody else could be using also. And so we've got to get control of all this stuff, and get all this, go and sue the NCAA mess out of the window, because it's just creating situations that none of us, are for.
Here with Mike Houston, longtime collegiate head football coach, here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, inside of the Great Lakes Honda City Studios, having the conversation about Diego Pavia's lawsuit and the situation that this could create for junior college, and changing the NCAA even more so. This Future of Collegiate Athletics special that started with Gary Stokin, President CEO of Peach Bowl Inc., and continues with Mike Houston, longtime head football coach at the collegiate level. The conversation I had with Gary, Mike, before you came on, airing that conversation, he echoed some things you were saying. Talking about a salary cap, talking about a commissioner of college football, someone to oversee college football, and to have a board that works with him. Now, Gary talked about the Power Four being on that board. I want to get your thoughts on a few different things. And forgive me, because we start the week off on a Monday, and I'm going to ask a lot of you, Mr. Houston. But to look at the fact of a few different pieces. Should there be a commissioner of college football? And should that commissioner have a board to keep them honest? And if they have a board, does that board only include the Power Four, a.k.a. the Big Ten, the Big 12, the ACC, and the SEC? Or does that board have to have representation from the MAC, the Mountain West, the new whatever the Pac-12 becomes, as well as the Sun Belt, the American Athletic Conference, and Conference USA? So does there need to be a commissioner of college football? Does that person need a board? And is that board comprised of Power Four or everybody?
Well, I think, first off, no doubt there needs to be a commissioner. And yeah, I understand what he's saying about there being a board to help, with accountability. I do think the representation on that board should be from whatever schools or conferences the commissioner oversees. But I will say this: I think the days of, there being 130 some odd FBS schools, and they're all, playing at the same division or same level, I think that needs to be gone. The SEC and the Big Ten are playing with a different set of rules than the rest of the Power Four, whatever the Power Four means. And then the Power Four, they're playing with a different set of rules than what the rest of the Group of Five are playing with. And they're different. They're in different places. They have different financial components. They have different resources, and it's not equitable across the board.
Yeah.
So I've said it the last time I think we were on here. I see in the next, I don't know how many years, less than 5 though, I would say, I see the Big Ten and the SEC separating with whomever they want to bring with them. Okay, whomever that is from the Big 12 and the ACC, I see them separating and becoming their own entity, and that will be the highest division of college athletics or college football, or however you want to phrase it.
Yeah.
Does football just separate from everything else, or do you have, basketball and baseball and all the other sports go with it?
Yeah.
But I think you have a commissioner and a board that runs that division, and I think that the next step down, they've got to have, they've got to have the same kind of structure that fits them. And the reason I say that for those schools is because the revenue, the TV revenue that those schools are getting payouts yearly is so proportionally ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
They have more money to spend. There's a reason Ohio State had $20 million to invest in that roster this year. And it's the reason they had the best roster in college football. And everybody sat there and watched. Okay, so if you're at pick the other school that has resources, you think they are not going to spend at least that much to try to win a national championship? And what they're doing at those schools is so much different than what you're doing at a Memphis or at a SMU. I mean, SMU, they did really well in the ACC this year. They made the college football playoff, but they don't have the financial resources that an Ohio State does.
Yeah.
And so I just think continue to see separation. And I'm all for this. I'm all for guidelines, rules, accountability, and an even playing field. And it'll never be completely even, but just so you have a chance, if I'm playing in the Big Ten, you know, just so I have a chance to be highly competitive in my conference. And I know there's other factors that go in, a place like Vanderbilt, a place like Northwestern, or something like that. But you know, as long as I've got a chance to be on as even a playing field as possible with my competition, that's because right now you have it's free agency, and you have kids that transferred during this last window. You had kids that transferred from institution A to institution B. They'll go through spring practice, and you'll see a lot of kids leave that institution that they just transferred to and transfer somewhere else in May. And I don't think that's not good for anybody. That's not good for the programs. That's not good for the student athletes.
Yeah.
I think you're going to really see some issues with academic eligibility and graduation in the coming years. And who knows if these stories are going to be written or not, but you're going to have a kid every time they transfer, they lose credits because not all your credits will transfer from institution A to institution B.
Right.
And so you're going to have some guys that are going to run out of eligibility, but they're not going to be anywhere close to graduating. And you're going to see more than you have in the past because of all the transferring around. And so I think, again, unintended consequences. I just think you've got to get control of all this stuff and figure out what is best for everyone. What's best for the student athletes, what's best for the institutions, what's best for the sport, and give some guidelines and give some governance. But in my opinion, you're not going to be able to have that unless you go completely to a NFL style model where there's collective bargaining, salary cap, contracts, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and it plays off of some things you said there. Gary Stokan also said he envisioned 64 teams instead of 130 plus in FBS. Those 64 split into 8 different divisions of 8. Those divisions will give us regions, and those regions will be overseen by this commissioner. So a lot of things off of what you just said, Mike, because we've talked about it before, my prediction back around the beginning of COVID was that the SEC is going to break away and form its own thing. Prior to that, I had 2 conversations with then ACC Commissioner John Swofford about what autonomy means. Why did those 5 conferences, the Pac-12, the Big 12, the Big 10, the ACC, and the SEC, choose the word autonomy? which means self-governing. Why would they have to go to the NCAA and say, hey, we need to redefine who we are? And these are the words we chose. Power is something that was chosen by the media. Autonomy, self-governance, was chosen by the conferences legislatively to essentially state, in my opinion, we exist as our own body underneath your umbrella, but if we choose to get out from underneath your umbrella, we've defined ourselves as such. And it really didn't make any sense to me. If you're going to be self-governing, why are you even in the NCAA? And when I sat with John Swofford and I had multiple conversations, and I specifically remember one that we had at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York, during the ACC tournament, I said, John, you're autonomous. That means you're self-governing. Is there the thought that one day you will leave the NCAA? He said, well, it's not out of the realm of possibility. And I'm paraphrasing here. Not out of the realm of possibility. It's something that's not that it hasn't been discussed, but not right now. And that sat with me. And the reason why they used autonomy, being the son of a lawyer, the words you use in legal documents makes a lot of sense to me in where you're going. So I'm looking at this legally. I'm looking at the word autonomy. I'm having a conversation with John Swofford. I'm having another one with John Swofford. Then COVID hits. I watch the SEC. I see Oklahoma and Texas leave the Big 12. And I say to myself, something inside of me says the SEC is going to leave. Within that time period, the Big 10 goes and gets West Coast teams, which makes no logical sense, no geographical sense. It makes monetary sense to look at the SEC and say, we got the North, we got the Northeast, we got the Midwest, you got the Southeast, you got the Southern Middle. Now we went and got the West Coast. The only thing that we don't have, and this is me saying I'm the Big Ten talking to the SEC in what my belief is, the SEC going, or the Big Ten going to the SEC and saying the only part of the country that we don't have covered between our two conferences, Idaho, Arizona, Wyoming, we got everybody else. So if you're going to go with us. Let us be a part of this, and let's go together. You just stated the SEC and the Big Ten will become their own thing. That was a statement I made 3 years ago, if not longer. So we're on the same page in that. If it becomes 64 teams, I've also made the statement, Mike, and you and I have talked about this, that Clemson and Florida State, now keep in mind, ESPN just extended their basic rights agreement with the ACC through 2035-36, which is supposed to protect that group of ACC schools, which they have 18 because they added Cal, SMU, and Stanford, albeit I believe Cal and Stanford are temporary, but they added these schools in. Now, that does not mean that Florida State has stopped their fight, and it doesn't mean that Clemson has stopped their fight. The signs point to the fact that Clemson and Florida State are not wavering in this thing. Okay, the ESPN did that. Well, that's all well and good. But from everything that I know up to this point, Florida State and Clemson are not like, okay, our fight's over. So if they leave, which I've stated them before, and I've stated Miami because I don't think Miami has loyalty because I saw what they did to the Big East when I was a kid, and I look at Notre Dame. If those four schools, as I've said to you before, become a part of this SEC Big Ten new top tier of collegiate athletics, for football at least, then they have all the major brands. You can claim that a national champion because who's going to argue with you? But here's my question. If it is 64, if they do regionalize, I have two questions for you. Does that mean that conferences dissolve in this new world of commissioner in 64? Do we lose conferences, number one? And number two, and here's a question that's really going to need to be asked, do conferences currently, if we form this divisional group of 64, do conferences like the SEC and Big Ten that form this new world have the right to realign by asking schools to leave that do not help their portfolio? Like a Rutgers, like a Maryland, like a maybe Arkansas right now, and Vanderbilt in every year but this past year, does the SEC and the Big Ten have a right to force you out? Is the question. So in this formation, do we lose conferences? Because that's gonna there's a lot of money that's locked up in that. So how are they going to work that thing out?
Right.
So do we lose conferences? How do we keep those within this new model if there is a model of this? And is a conference allowed to ask you to exit their conference?
Well, I think everything will get redone, and you're right. There's a lot of money tied up in the TV contracts with the current conferences. Um, but and in my opinion, the thing that needs to be done is there needs to be complete realignment. And just like you mentioned, 8 divisions of 8 in this new proposed, top tier. I think there needs to be more regional identity with the conferences. And the reason is this, football, yes, UCLA traveling to Michigan is not the easiest trip in the world. Penn State traveling, to USC, not the easiest trip in the world. But, in football, you only play one game a week.
Yeah.
So, off-season scheduling and stuff, you can organize it to minimize some of the impact on those teams. But think about basketball, volleyball, baseball, where you have multiple games a week and you have cross-country travel. What kind of impact does that have on a student athlete? That's what they're called, student athletes. They go to class, they're taking classes, they're working on getting a degree. So how are they supposed to do that when they're traveling cross country for ball games multiple nights a week? Problem number one. Problem number two, and again, like I said, the financials at these top schools, are so much different than everybody else. The cost of that travel is enormous. So sure, they can handle it, but back to a smaller, group of 5 school that's in the American Conference, where it's, the American Conference is a national conference. The travel for a volleyball team cross country, multiple trips, multiple games a week, the financial impact. So I think that you're going to see in this new, whatever it comes around, I think you will see more regionalized conferences because of those two factors. And especially, when the group of 5 or whatever it's going to become, when they reorganize, I think you'll see an extremely strong push from college presidents and college ADs to get regional conferences. And I think that's good for the sport anyway. I think that's good for, I'm just telling you, you get a, South Carolina Clemson. Okay, they're not in the same conference, but you look at the fans at those games because everybody can get to the games. Okay, versus a Penn State USC. Okay, how many Penn State fans are going to travel cross country to go see a game in LA? Okay, you'll have some, but you get these regionalized conferences and you're going to see the stadiums packed out at max capacity every week because the fans will be able to get there. So I think for the financial piece, for the betterment of the student athletes, and I think it'll create better rivalries, I think you'll see these conferences become more regionalized. Now, your other question was, does a conference have a right to ask someone to leave their conference? I think the whole thing is going to get reorganized. I think they're going to pick and choose who is in what division based on what they bring, to that level of ball. So I think you will see some teams that are in the autonomous 4, power 4, whatever you want to call them. You're going to see some teams that are in that level right now that I think will be down with, the group of 5 level. And I think all of this will be good for the sport, and it'll be good for college athletics. But I think it all has to start with There has to be strong leadership, and that leadership has to have power. Because right now, the issue is the NCAA is the governing body. They are providing the leadership, but they're having the power taken away by the courts, and it really just creates a dysfunctional relationship.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, people ask for Congress, but you forget when you ask for Congress, you ask for the national government, who's made plenty of mistakes, that this is going to put ourselves in a situation where it's getting even more dicey. And as the NCAA is seeing, the courts aren't agreeing with them. And the statement by Judge Campbell that, and keep in mind with this, the case is still pending with Diego Pavia. Judge Campbell said the NCAA's justification for restricting JUCO players' eligibility, quote unquote, falls flat. So he hasn't made his decision, but it sounds like he's not impressed by what the NCAA is doing. Here's the NCAA's response. They said, and I quote, the NCAA is disappointed in today's ruling. And this was with the Diego Pavia injunction that happened in December, I think December 18th. The NCAA is disappointed in today's ruling and wants all student athletes to maximize their name, image, and likeness potential without depriving future student athletes of opportunities. Altering the enforcement of rules overwhelmingly supported by NCAA member schools makes a shifting environment even more unsettled. The NCAA is making changes to deliver more benefits to student athletes, but a patchwork of state laws and court opinions make clear that partnering with Congress is essential to provide stability for the future of all collegiate athletics, or future of all college. Here's my thing. The NCAA, in my opinion, is giving name, image, and likeness because California state law provided it and it was forced upon the NCAA. My opinion of depriving student athletes opportunities has already happened. Because back in the day before the transfer portal, a coach could give a list of schools to a player and say, if you transfer within conference, you can't sit out a year, you got to sit out 2 years. Plus, I know the 5 schools that are talking to you, and you can't go to those 5 schools. So if you leave me, you can't go in the conference to the schools that know you and have competed against you. You can't go to the 5 other schools that I know are talking to you. So you're going to have to go to some, school that is not going to provide you the opportunities that these schools are going to provide you. It's happened to people. It happened to a friend of mine at Syracuse University. So the reality is here that student athletes' opportunities have already been altered, that the NCAA is a $1 billion non-for-profit industry that makes no sense when you say non-for-profit, and they're being forced to make these decisions. These aren't decisions that the NCAA made wholeheartedly. I don't, and maybe there's some people that are within the NCAA that are doing this, but Mike, making decisions out of the goodness of your heart, I tell people this all the time. I covered women's sports back in 2003 when I was ridiculed, questioned. Why are you doing that? Who cares? Nobody watches women's sports. Nobody pays attention to it. Why would you waste your time? That's what I got at the beginning of my career. Why would you even waste your time? And now women's sports are being covered everywhere. Do you think it's out of the goodness of people's hearts, Mike? To some. But I also think it's because it's been thrust upon them. It's been forced upon them. Because now it's cool to cover women's sports. It's important to cover women's sports. We don't want to affect the apple cart that is the politically correct world. I didn't do it when it was PC. I didn't do it when it was popular. And I didn't do it when people were applauding and carrying me on their shoulders. So when I see big name markets cover women's athletics, I ask the question, are you doing it because you want to? Are you doing it because you feel like you have to? Because back when I did it, there wasn't any, we're going to pay you all this money, we're going to do all this stuff, we're going to boost you by doing it. It was like, hey, if Dan goes and does it, let him go do that stupid thing, and we're going to keep doing this. So I ask the same question to the NCAA now. If you were doing this out of the goodness of your heart, if you were creating opportunities for student athletes, why were they so restricted from transferring in the past? Why were they punished for transferring in conference? Why could a coach cut them off at the knees and say, I don't want you to play for me, And I also am not going to allow you to play for anybody on my schedule or anybody that wants you. That coach could be bitter, could be hateful, and could kill that person's career and give them a lose-lose situation. I also look at a billion-dollar industry that says, well, we want these kids to make money. No, you don't. Because if you did, any of the decisions, Mike, that we're talking about today, any of these things, if the NCAA wanted women's basketball to have the same opportunities as men's basketball, they wouldn't have to take pictures and videos and post it on social media that their workout room was subpar. If they wanted student athletes to make money, California wouldn't have to force this upon the NCAA. If they wanted these kids to not be punished and held hostage by coaches, they would have provided opportunities and not allowed those restrictions. I don't think the NCAA is doing anything right now because it's out of the morality and the goodness and the values, and it's the God-given right of the freedom of the student athlete. I think the NCAA is making decisions now because the NCAA is finally seeing what happens when you spit into the wind.
Well, and they're making decisions right now to keep from keep from being sued. That's the deal. Is they're playing defense so much with these lawsuits, and they've gotten tired of it. They're running out of money and running out of lawyers. So yeah, you're right. I mean, they're doing these things because they have to. And I played back in the day when those restrictions were on us. And you're right. My ability to I was very happy where I was. I didn't want to transfer, but my ability to do so was very restricted. So I do think that some of the change has been needed and has been good. And I do think that there needs to continue to be change, but the change needs to be what's best for everything. Because we are seeing a situation now where it's great. The athletes, there is no doubt, and I tell a lot of people this, my players that I've had in the last 10 years, there needed to be a way for us to support them better financially, because what the sport has gone to is, if you're a college football player, you report to campus in the summer after your senior year of high school, and you train all summer. You take classes and you train. You play the season. Yeah. In the spring, you train, take classes all spring, and you're talking hours and hours a day, and you do that all summer. I mean, you literally, I would give my players a calendar to give to their parents that laid out when they had breaks, because the reality became, if you wanted a family vacation, it had to be on one of the 3 breaks that you get during a calendar year. So these student athletes are working year round training for their sport. And unlike their peers who are just regular students, they don't have the time in the day or in the week to get a part-time job to help pay bills, to get a job to help, in the summer do whatever they want to do. And the scholarships, well, they're on scholarship. They're getting cost of attendance. Yeah, they are. But is that scholarship and that cost of attendance stipend, is that enough to cover everything they need to live day to day? And the reality was, no, it was not. So their family, even if they're on scholarship, their family was still having to support them financially, which a lot of families can, but there's some families that can't. There are some kids that come from very, very poor settings, and there's not enough money to help them. And so there was a need for us to give much better financial assistance to the student athletes. So those things changing is a positive. But I don't think anyone would sit here and tell you that giving an 18, 19-year-old kid who's just trying to figure out how to become a man, giving him large amounts of cash all at once is going to be something that's going to be positive for that young man 10 years later. Because the reality is that money's not going to last very long. Yeah. Okay. And then 10 years later, have they still learned the lessons that you learn growing up, going to college, going through all the things that you go through with your development that allow you to be prepared to live a highly productive life. I think there's got to be some thought put into how do we make sure that long term the student athletes are not harmed just as much as they're being helped by the current landscape with NIL and transfers.
Yeah, I mean we're in a place, Mike, where it's everyone for themselves. There is no team, and there are schools that do have this. There are schools that do have this unity and this connection, and they do live within this world. Notre Dame made it to the championship, and they're very much talking about their Catholic values, very much talking about their faith values, very much talking about God, talking about the team. We do things differently here. Even Ohio State, Ryan Day saying to me when I asked him the question, he said, "Hey, this," or I'm sorry, saying earlier on in the post game press conference, and then I asked him a question as follow up. He said, "This place isn't for everybody. It was for the guys that are here, but it's not for everybody. It's for Cody and Will, but not for everybody to come to Ohio State." So when we look at where things are at right now, there is the reality that a team still exists and there are coaches that still care. But we're also living in a world where, Mike, this was coming. Okay, you were in the American Athletic Conference, and I'm not going to name the coaches, but there was 3 coaches in the American that I had talked to that had signed extensions in December or January for that following season and then some, and they were all gone. 3 American Athletic Conference coaches said, yes, I'm going to stay, and signed extensions, and then were gone to another institution. In December, signing day. January, right before February, signing day. Gone. So we're living in a world where we have seen coaches make inordinate amounts of money. We have seen coaches that leave and go. And I said this to Mike Oresco, the former commissioner of the American, and he said, "Dan, I like it, and I'm probably going to use it." And I said, "Well, Mike, give me credit." I said, "Why are we worried about student athletes in the transfer portal? Coaches and institutions have been in the portal for years." So living in this constant flux of a coach can do whatever they want, but a player can't. A school can pay millions of dollars to exit and completely destabilize a conference to boost another conference. Realignment is going to happen because destabilization cannot sustain itself. You can't have a nuclear reactor continuing to have the alarms go off without having some set of parameters
Right.
to stop the leakage that's in that nuclear reactor.
Right.
So the NCAA essentially has a bunch of nuclear reactors going off right now, and they cannot get enough teams out to each of these reactors to stop them. So this is the world that we're living in. They're dealing with NIL, that's one nuclear
Right.
reactor. They're dealing with the portal, that's another nuclear reactor. They're dealing with realignment, that's another nuclear reactor. They're dealing with the JUCO rules, that's a nuclear reactor. They're dealing with congressional stuff with the House and the NCAA and the settlement and all this stuff, that's another nuclear reactor. So they put themselves in this position. And Mike, you and I are God-fearing people. There are people that fear God, and there are people that do not regard God as existing. But I can promise you something. Whether you believe in God or you don't, whatever you put in to this world, no matter how long it takes, either comes back good if you put in good, or it comes back not so good if you put in not so good. The NCAA has been functioning under the "we are God, you work for us," and it's not working now because you cannot get enough of their people to these nuclear reactors to stop the leakage. And what is going to happen to this NCAA is what I predicted, sadly, almost 7 years ago, is I don't think we're going to have an NCAA because I don't think that they're going to be able to survive what has happened here. I said the NCAA needs a check and balance place. You know how there's 3 branches of government? Well, the NCAA is one overlord of government. It's like having a dictatorship. I don't know how they can live through this because the amount of money going to college football, the amount of expenses going to the Olympic sports because of this conference realignment of 23 and 2400 miles, all of these things that have gone on, when things don't make sense, eventually somebody sits down and goes, this is not this is not ethically responsible for us to do. This is not good for the student athlete. This is not good monetarily for us. This is not good for us in regional matchups and whatnot. It's not good, and it means nothing to anybody for Rutgers to play UCLA. So when if you want to play non-conference, but when you look at all of these things that are going on, someone eventually is going to sit down with this, Mike, and say it is not responsible to the mental health, the economic health of the institution, the mental health of the student athlete. It just doesn't make sense. And I'm sorry to the people that thought that this wasn't coming, but common sense has a way of always rearing its ugly head. And like I said, with so many nuclear power plants with alarms going off, they cannot get enough people to stop these leaks. And I don't know, Mike, if the NCAA is going to be able to sustain and exist beyond this point. But I don't think they can blame anybody but themselves, the NCAA, for what's happened.
Well, the whole thing is, for years, we tried to claim that it was amateur sports, and it's not. And it is a business. And if we don't run it like a business, then you're going to have these issues. And when you got the TV contracts, however many years ago that it started, where you started having these large amounts of revenue coming into these institutions, and coaching salaries started going up, 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 and you have all this money coming in, and you're not sharing it with everybody. That's where the issues started, and that's how you ended up where you are today. But the only solution is treat it like what it is. It's a business. The student athletes, you can say whatever you want. If they are working to bring in revenue to the institution, I mean, to me, that's an employee. Yeah. And so you got to figure out how that relationship's going to work. But the student athletes are employees of the institution. Structure it like a business, run it like a business. And with any business sports league, okay, you've got to have a commissioner. You've got to have set guidelines and set rules. And I think rules for the coaches too. I mean, you look at the NFL. If you are under contract in, Jacksonville, New York, Dallas, wherever, and there's an opening somewhere, those teams cannot just go and talk to a coach that's under contract. They have to get permission to contact somebody, and there's all kinds of rules to how they have to go about doing that. And if the team wants to restrict and not allow them to talk to a coach, then they can do that.
Yeah.
And that's allowed. And we saw that go down in Dallas with Mike McCarthy just this past hiring cycle, where I think the Bears wanted to talk to him while he was still under contract with the Cowboys, and the Cowboys said no. And so that denied that contact until after McCarthy was out of his contract in Dallas. And so I think that's fine. It's part of it. But we gotta get some structure, and we gotta get some rules, and we gotta get some enforcement, and we have to have strong leadership for the sport. And I think that's all going to come because of what you said. It's everybody's going to get tired of, why are we doing this way? There has to be a better way. There has to be a better way for the non-revenue sports to function. It's crazy to be flying on a Tuesday night across country to play a volleyball match. That's insane for everybody. So they some common sense has to come back to how this thing is being run. But it's going to be interesting to watch the next several years.
Yeah, and like I said, they don't have enough to dispatch at this point. So, I mean, where we are, Mike, I mean, you are in this chapter of your life where you're watching, right? I mean, I spoke with other coaches that have been in this position of you're watching. How does this affect you? Does it affect you? Does it say to you, I want to now work in sports broadcasting? Does it say to you, I want to work in the new leadership of this iteration? Does it say to you, I want to work in the NIL space and I want to be someone who is a liaison for these student athletes? Does it say to you, I want to be a head coach still? Does it say to you, hey, the head coach got way too much to deal with? I would rather just be $1 million coordinator. What does all of this do for you, Mike? Because you are a good coach. You have done great things. I give you credit for East Carolina's success this season and for the fact that they got to more wins than losses and the fact that they got to a bowl game, because your leadership and your sustainability at a place that takes a lot to win at, which I know because I've been covering them for over a decade, and the people that you brought in, and I got to say this to you more than anything, Mike, you recruited student athletes to East Carolina that are good men. They're not just good football players, they are good men. And those good men, when I've done one interview with them and I reach out to them, immediate response. What's up, Dan? My guy, I got you. I'm going to the NFL. Let's do an interview. So you have stand-up people that you brought in there. You had run a stand-up place and operation. If I was overseeing an institution and you walked into my doors, you would have ample time to tell me why you should be my coach. So my question to you is, what's next? And does any of this affect what's next for you?
First off, we're blessed. My family and I are very blessed. Um, Certainly, this is a time of transition for me, and it's something new that I've been going through. But the positives are that my 16-year-old son, who's a sophomore in high school, I've got to see every basketball game he's had this winter. And, I've been able to enjoy watching his progress. My 12-year-old son, who's a sixth grader, he's playing middle school basketball. I've been able to watch him. I've had tremendous quality time with my wife, Amanda, and both boys during the holiday season. So we are blessed. I'm not as stressed as a lot of people on a Monday morning, in the coaching profession today.
True.
But I'll say this: what is next for me? I don't know. I've considered everything that you brought up, everything, and what I keep coming back to is 30 years ago. I'll tell you just real quick my story. I was pre-med in college. I took the MCAT. I interviewed at a couple of schools to go to med school. I was put on a waiting list and told to work for a year in the medical industry and reapply. I chose not to do that. I took a job teaching high school chemistry and physics and coaching football and basketball. And a few months in, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And I never reapplied to med school, never looked back. And I have been blessed to do something that I love to do. I have enjoyed the relationships that I have with the student athletes, whether it was the high school level, the college level, wherever.
Yeah.
It is the fulfillment that I get is by pouring into young men and helping them develop from that 18-year-old kid that graduates from high school to that 22-year-old young man who has a degree, has had a great experience at the college level, and is now prepared to go out and have a great life. That's what I want to do, and I don't think I am done coaching. During this phase right now, I'm going to spend a lot of time with reflection, professional development, looking at the ways I've done things. I'm going to get a chance to visit a lot of people and see how they do things and, be better prepared the next opportunity that I get, be better prepared than I was last time around. And I'm excited about that piece. And I know this, I know that and you mentioned faith earlier. I am a firm believer that God has put us in this situation for a reason, and that there's something else that He has for myself personally and for my family, that He had to take us through this time in our lives in order to get to that. And that faith is what my wife and I are leaning on right now, and we're enjoying this time that we have, and we're excited about the next chapter whenever that door is open for us. So we'll see. I don't think that I'm going to do the broadcasting thing, but you never know. I don't think I'm going to get into administration. I don't think that's where I'm really supposed to be, but you never know. So we're just working hard each day to prepare for what's next.
And don't think I forgot that you said that if and when you ended up somewhere that you need a general manager for football operations. And I did not forget that you said that I would be a phone call away. I'm like, I'm gonna hold you to it. So, but
Absolutely. You just better be careful what you're saying you're going to get into now. It's something else. But I'll tell you, coaching is a great profession for all the things we've sat here and we've talked about for the past hour that are issues in our sport. Coaching is the most incredible profession that there is. And I've been blessed to be a part of it. And I look forward to what that next chapter is.
absolutely. And the thing that I appreciate more than anything is the friendship that comes from the fact of
Absolutely.
two people giving each other a chance, and that's 100% of this screen for you. So, Mike Houston, longtime collegiate head coach, and someone who helps me unpack these very, very big issues going on with collegiate athletics right now. And of course, this conversation today about JUCO, NCAA eligibility, Diego Pavia, as well as so much more. Mike, I cannot thank you enough. Please enjoy Carolina for me as I enjoy the cold for you this morning.
Absolutely. Just stay bundled up there.
Oh yeah, yesterday it was a balmy 7. So it was
Whew.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely been very very cold, and but one of my nicknames from college is Iceman, so I guess I can't complain, but I definitely I will look to have some warmer weather, but you and I will keep in touch as we always do. Please say hello to your family, and one of the greatest things, and probably the greatest thing you've ever said to me on this show, is what you just said, which most coaches don't get to do. You haven't missed a game for your kids. So,
No,
God bless to
it's been
that.
great.
And I love it. And I look forward to talking with you soon.
Hey, take care, Dan.
Take care,
Good.
Mike.
Thanks for having me on. Have a
Thank
good
you.
one.
Take care.